Cool, man. I know this isn't your first rodeo. Do you have any questions for me before we dive into it?
Not at all. I mean, let's just, go as deep as we can. I mean, obviously I have no limits, so, we can
Right
really
on.
get into the meat of any situation. I kind of prefer it that way. There's enough stuff out there for the novices. So, we
Yes,
won't be doing any justice by, giving some surface level content. But,
sure.
if we can go deep, that's always, just one of my requests. But not all, it's wherever it takes us.
Yeah, man. I love it. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, people. We spend a lot of time analyzing the power pyramid and the actions of the nefarious elite, but maybe we should take a break from looking outwardly today and start looking in. Well, today's guest, Sevan Bomar, is here to remind us that giving too much attention to the puppet master's playbook is a surrendering of our power, and we might be better suited to focus on raising our consciousness level and unlocking the hidden potential we've been distracted from. Sevan is a widely known spiritual teacher committed to the universal transformation of humanity and involution for all beings, the author of The Code to the Matrix, and the man behind astralquest.com and secretenergy.com. Together, a huge archive of knowledge and interactive enlightenment guide covering subjects like alchemy, telepathy, precognition, tachyon, energy bombardment, mass quantum evolutionary biophysics, and much, much more. But if that wasn't enough, he's also the man behind the Innerversity, a virtual institute of a similar nature, along with several other projects to boot. A wealth of knowledge, the man who knows the plan, Sevan Bomar. Welcome to THC. How the hell are you?
Oh man, I'm doing exceptionally well, Greg. It's wonderful to be on, and thanks so much for that, concise introduction. It's not every day that someone's able to cover, the full scope of what's going on our end, and it's just amazing to be on Higherside Chat, and I'm ready and available to deliver a message to the audience, and yeah, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some new stuff, and we love new. So we're going into 2016. So I think this is an amazing time for us to, to start seeing and metamorphosizing what we really want versus,
Yes.
just following the same old program.
Well said. Yeah, it's a real treat, man. Thanks. I've listened to hours of your interviews and presentations, and I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface. And I know your InterVersity course does talk about deciphering symbolism as well as deprogramming, and I think those are areas we talk about a lot here, but it does seem kind of like it's just part of a bigger process. And even though I think some of us do tend to get stuck in there, and I guess to get this ball rolling, it's a big question, but once someone is aware that they've been steered into a pointless career, pushing papers around for the profits of the system, or they recognize the archonic control structures, instead of just dwelling on the negativity there and wallowing in this feeling of being trapped on the hamster wheel, what are some of the first steps to, I guess, reclaiming your life, uncovering your purpose, or manifesting a more enriching reality?
Well, that's a great question. The first thing that I would say is that the system is really structured to actually demoralize a person. So there's a lot of, when you start waking up, you somewhat find it impossible to get out of the, the everyday run-of-the-mill kind of program. And this is because mentally, spiritually, and physically there has been some damage. But we do generally encourage people to actually work more with their physical body first, because that's like, what kind of takes the most damage. If somehow the body is not conducting enough, the pH is off, the filters, as we call them, or the organs are clogged, and these kind of things, it doesn't really matter what kind of information that you take in, because it will have to be processed by those filters. So the first thing that we really encourage people to do once they start to wake up is to start going directly inward, hence the term inner stand, which was, I don't know if I coined it, but it's definitely something that I began to use about 7 or 8 years ago very heavily, and then I just started seeing everyone using the term. But it just means make a stand within, because you know how they say if you don't stand for something, then you'll fall for anything. But this is
Yeah.
really about the inner stand. So it's like going into your own consciousness and beginning to see yourself as not just a member of a planet, but actually a cosmos. Because it's incredible to, when you tell someone that you're actually an entire cosmos, you can tell the depth of the programming that's actually been done on this dimension, because people don't actually believe that. And so my work, it's been 7 years, on a consistent basis, but really all my life I've been studying spiritual knowledge. So my work is really centered around actually showing a person beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are in fact a cosmos, and that the organs in their body do play the planetary system, and that the geometry that's within the body, phi, and what that connects to is all of the structure that we're dealing with in our creation. And so when you begin to learn that, which is basically about yourself, then you get re-empowered, literally, that your current or your currency, which are tied into each other in the body, that helps the mind and helps the spirit to be able to make its travel and its progress starts to build. And so a big part of that, again, is cleansing out the body. And that's starting even with the root chakra, colon cleansing and that kind of thing. And then allowing those organs to begin to vibrate at the frequency that they're designed to vibrate at. And then when that happens, the person starts to have the fuel, the will, literally, to what's necessary to push through and continue to keep pushing through what can be like a sluggish reality. So that's really the first major point that I would have to deliver. And then also really working on environmental programming. That means where you're actually immersing yourself. And the easiest way to really start checking things is to check all of the orifices, meaning what's coming inside of your vision, your eyes, what's coming in your ears, what's coming in your mouth, even what's coming through your pores, to start having your own, I would say, customs or system of defense that you set up personally to begin to guard your consciousness from what is actually entering and what could actually, somewhat cause a mutiny within your own physical, mental, and spiritual structure. So, it's a very deep topic because obviously the body is not simple. It's a very complex structure. It does involve more than we will ever see in technology. In fact, technology is plagiarized directly from the spiritual, mental, and physical structures of the body. So this means that we do have to spend quite a bit of time, especially realigning ourselves. And I do see that, though, as time well spent versus, if you're at the job or you're, catering to someone else's needs. And at the end of the day, what do you really get from that? Maybe a little bit of paper, but overall, there's not much reward. But when a person spends that time with themselves and begins to invest within themselves, then they find this benefit right within their thinking, right within their spiritual progress, and also being able to metamorphosize the environment that's around them. So it's definitely about the person, and that's really what this message centers around. And it's not about gods, and it's not about religions and aliens and those kind of things, even though we do have a plethora of data on those kind of things. It's still about the person themselves being the central character, if you may, in this theme. And that's how we actually exist. Everything is central to us. We see from the inside of our consciousness outwards. So, whether I want to admit it or not, that I actually, even with you, Greg, I revolve around your world because you're seeing me from an external level. Same thing with me. So we all have to realize that the entire existence here on the physical plane is geocentric. So things are rotating around us. So this means that if we're not at our best and feeling our best, then the only reflection that we're going to get from the reality and things that we're examining is exactly identical to what we're projecting.
Man, well said. Yeah, we're all a cosmos. I like that. Yeah. And working on the physical body is something that the conspiracy world, I think they miss that a lot. If you look at the 90s, maybe more so, there's a lot of overweight, unhealthy conspiracy hosts screaming with a vein popping out of the side of their neck. And you're right. I mean, I'd have to admit that my physical body has taken some abuse. But in this system, in this modern Western society, it's definitely hard not to. And I guess setting up a system where, you have some defenses is great. And for sure. As far as there being other realms beyond this 3D reality, I think a lot of us accept that intellectually, but we haven't had the personal experience to really push us over the edge. And I know you have had some paranormal experiences that verified this for you. I guess, can you tell us a little bit about them and maybe how people can open up themselves to similar experiences? Because it seems kind of difficult, or at least foreign to our current mindset.
For sure. Well, let's just simplify this, if we can, to exactly what happens when you do start to become aware of other densities, other realms, other realities. And the easiest way to see this is that we all emit a frequency and a vibration. And our world is in a specific spectrum. So it does, let's say, run 7 chords, if you may, and we're just using some numbers here. So let's say there's 7 chords in this whole spectrum, and as long as you don't steer outside of those chords or those tones, then you'll never realize anything that you feel is not in place. And I say that a lot about even phi, that phi is a specific geometric system used to create most of, if not all of, what we see around us. But in the event that we see something that is not matching that geometry, it's going to look very strange to us. It may even evoke a little bit of fear for us. So this is just to let us know how comfortable we are with this particular wavelength. So when a person's having a breakthrough, and that's a really good word, a breakthrough is actually breaking the walls or the barriers to that particular spectrum that the person may be trapped in. So, or I won't even use the term trapped in this tense. We'll just say that the person is actually inhabiting. So when you raise your vibration or frequency, or you lower it, because behold, we see the ladder going up and down. There's realms above, if you may, and there's realms below. But when you break that wall down, then you start to become aware of other realities that actually overlay this one. And generally for me, how that happened was I rose my body into a higher vibration using tones. It was actually, I won't say just completely by accident, because there's a lot of synchronicity wrapped around the scenario, but I didn't actually know that what I was doing was going to cause this kind of effect. Later on, I actually figured out that there was quite a few different ways to do this. As you know, I believe the Matrix series says, some people come into the knowledge of the Matrix by entirely different means. So this means that you can do it by tones and vibrations. You can do it by cleansing the internal body. You can also do it by there's certain substances such as what we call diamond tree or DMT. There's ayahuasca. And, so just to explain it from that level, each of these particular aspects, whether it's mantra, those are frequencies, whether it's DMT, these are bioethnogens that are carrying certain frequencies. So these frequencies are so dominant that when a person puts them in their body, it kind of overrides the system, even if it's just for a moment. And in that process, the person starts to become aware of other things. They start to have this breakthrough. And how you really term this from a occult level is that there are shells that are actually around the person's body that are developed just like a tree over time, and over them going through certain experiences, through even certain planetary systems. And these shells begin to form around the person. So when they go into these high frequencies or low frequencies, those shells are then broken. And then from that point, the person has the ability to peer into and realize other things. And so I've got some methods myself down pat, and that's just because what some people would say is a psychonaut or a quester. I'm always looking to peer into other realities to find the connection. Because the other thing is that it's not like, you just go there and, you come back. I think a lot of the interpretations of even out of the body experiences can be a little fanciful. It's really more of that you're coming into another spectrum, and then it's up to you to begin to identify what exactly you're looking at and how that corresponds to where we are now, because there is a saying that's ancient, and it's as above, so below. And allowing yourself to begin to realize the connection between what's above and what's below and how it plays out down here becomes the key to actually gaining what we call the blueprint. And we talk about this a lot in the InterVersity. But the blueprint is, after you start getting into this kind of knowledge and experience, it's so vast that you kind of look for some kind of guide or some kind of tool that you can use to determine, heads from tails, what's right and what's wrong. You need some kind of bearing or compass. And so the blueprint is that. It gives the person the ability to see something on a vast level. And then when coming into this reality, see where its correspondence is. Because on these kind of realms, let's say if you're going into the macro or the larger areas to where there's really only light, there's no dense objects. So trying to interpret what you're seeing there could be quite difficult unless you realize, oh my goodness, that's the metal, that's iron, or that's a tree. And so this is almost like a brand new learning phase then. And that's what it's like, because when you have these breakthroughs, it's very similar to a rebirthing process. And when you're rebirthed, then now you have to learn everything again. It's the same thing that actually happened here on this realm. And then just as a child laying in the crib, you sense more than anything what's going on. And in fact, the child in the mother's womb is very equipped to sense things through the mother's pH, the amniotic fluid, sounds, the tension that's going on within the uterus, etc. So this hypersentient being does have other faculties beside words and symbols to actually interpret what's going on. So it just really, I always say that high levels of consciousness is not addictive though. So it really takes for the person to keep pushing into this unknown to start to really become more familiar with what they're dealing with.
Yeah, man. And I like that you say it's not addictive, because I have had a breakthrough psychedelically, and yeah, it's great, but I haven't extrapolated a ton of meaning from it. And it validates that it's there, which is definitely something. But I've had a lot of spiritual teachers talk about the idea that we have a reason for manifesting in this matrix, a life path, an individual true will, or a higher purpose. Again, it sounds good. I think we want to feel important rather than like we're just a speck on a slightly bigger speck in an infinite universe. But how can we reach that aha moment where we really discover why we're here or what we're meant to do?
Well, the moment that we really stop giving our power away, and to make it as simple as possible, because again we're getting into very, very complex topics, but not something that we can actually I can explain. So I just try to simplify it as easy as possible, just for those who may be a little bit new to the content. But it's just like this: that everyone does indeed have a star in the sky, that we all correspond to a light, and a very bright light. But the distance between us and that light is likened unto our ability to realize that we existed way before we got here, and we actually come from non-existence. So that really boggles the brain. It's not even something that can really be comprehended by the physical mind. But our connection with ourselves on that expanded level is the key to our total realization of how much power and ability that we really have. So when we're in these kind of matrices, what we often are is overshadowed by, let's say, stars that actually are more aware of their connections. So we know enough that there's definitely societies that have, launched almost since the beginning of when we started counting time. And there's adherents to those societies that have actually studied this in depth. And mainly the king, and this is some things that are often missed within this reality, is the amount of influence that comes onto realities like this for thousands of years of what we would call the priest kings. And in those sects, what you have is you have this kind of knowledge about really astronomy. Like sometimes when people say astrology, then it gets into the paper and, reading your zodiac. But this is more of astronomy, and it's teaching you the position of the stars and the power that comes from the emission or the lights from stars. And if you can ever magnify or get yourself in tune with those kind of celestial bodies, because it's light energy, then you find yourself being able to not only master yourself, but if there's some abuse going on, even able to master others. So the difficulty that we face here is first reestablishing the connection with ourselves. It's very similar to like when the umbilical cord is cut when a child is being born. The child feels like then that it's been separated from the mother, but this is all illusionary. It's part of the physical reality. It's almost like the phantom limb phenomenon when someone gets their arm cut off in the reality, or in this illusionary reality, let's say, then when you see them on the astral plane, though, they still have that emission that arm is still there. And most of the time they still dream that they have that arm. And this is because that there's actually no real disconnection that takes place except for in our consciousness. So if our consciousness is disconnected from the totality of who we are, and that has a lot to do with how encouraged we feel and how much will we really have, then that's where the lack of power comes in at. And then, it's like falling down. That's why they sometimes call it the fallen ones. It's like coming down falling down a giant ladder after that, because then it's to where you could look to other things such as religions, basically anything outside yourself, for real answers and real truth, because everything will become somewhat I would just say non-identified. So a big part of this is that total realization that you're a magnetar. You're even larger than what the sun looks like. The sun is just actually really close in proximity. We already know that those stars that are out there, many of them are much more larger than the sun. But the reason why they remain so distant, and even more lately, because this is a continuous progress. This is not something that was set in stone 2,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, and then now it's said and done with. You don't actually even see most of the times from wherever you're staying stars. Like you see them when you go out to the desert, and you go out there and you see just how many there are, and it's quite majestic. But it also triggers you as a being to the fact of the total realization that that is something out there, and that something is you. And then, because, it's not just, okay, you're one star out there. The total realization is that you're actually all of them. And this becomes a bit much to take for obvious reasons. We call it all is self. This means that everything is encompassed within inside of this totality that we're existing in now. But if we keep taking a part of it, which happens with our judgments, which happens with our decisions. All these words actually equal division. It's like, okay, I like white, I don't like black, and I like shoes and not sandals. And when that goes on infinitely, all we're doing is just breaking down the energy more and more and more. Hence, what phi is about, because that's really the divisions and breaking down things into divisions. But it's all coming from the same source. So the person with the consciousness that begins to realize that they're everything and does this on a consistent basis with total faith in themselves, they actually begin to spin faster. There's the actual mechanics to this. Obviously, many people are familiar with the chakra centers, and the chakras are similar to wheels. And when that wheel, which is synonymous with the person's willpower, it's all connected even within the linguistic language, starts to build, so does this current. But it must be consistent. And obviously, if you're just getting off the block, it's not something that you begin to see immediately. And that's why they say our imagination and our belief is one of the key components to our power and to our success. So this is what it's about. But because there's no limitations in this, what a person truly can believe and conceive begins to build the more they get the proof that, hey, this is limitless. And that's kind of what happened with me in many of my experiences, is that I breached into things that not only gave me the appearance, like that I could just see it, but I can actually feel the potential and the threshold of power that we're talking about. It's actually more than the body physically can even hold. So this means that all of those myths that we're running out of power and that there's scarcity and that, we're going to die and all that is actually false. And a lot of that is a lot of that knowledge and experience is building the structure that it's rebuilding yourself. That's really what this is about. But there's also a key point in actually tearing it down. And this is, of course, the most difficult part, because a lot of times we tend to feel very solid within things like religious structures and concepts of an external God and mastery and as a doctor's degree and these kind of things. A person has gained some kind of solidity. So if they figure out that they have to tear that down in order to accept something greater, sometimes it's not easy, and most of the time it's not very easy to do that. But for those of us that go through that process of what we called earlier the rebirth, tearing it all down and then reconstructing it again, is very akin to an architect who builds a home first and then realizes that, there's a lot of things that they would change. Like maybe they wouldn't run the pipes in that area. Maybe they would build an extra bathroom over there. So if you ever got a chance to build a house again that you're going to live in, then you're going to design it to exclude the flaws that you found in what you had been living in before. So, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, man, you're great at breaking down these deep things. I love it. And, you mentioned imagination, and this gets into a lot of people talk about the idea of manifesting your reality and consciousness over matter. And I'm curious, do you think that the education system we have weeds out imagination on purpose, or do you think there's just something about the process of getting older that we kind of lose it along the way?
Well, first of all, the educational system hijacks the imagination. It actually implants like Pooh and Winnie the Pooh and Disney characters and X-Men, and that's what it does to the imagination. So in a certain sense, the system takes the real estate in your mind. Like the biggest real estate for sale is actually inside of your consciousness and the space inside of your mind. So for a person to begin to get that back sometimes is like almost like stealing it. You have to take your consciousness actually back from something that has overridden it. And in that process, we look at the word imagination. It tells us it's the image nation, or how to project something to create an entire world. And when we start tapping into that, then we realize that that was actually the entire purpose of the imagination. It's to begin to construct. It's the same thing that we're doing now, the same thing that we do in the dream. We can build an entire dream world where we're animated and acting out. We see friends from elementary school, people that we even forgot or thought we'd never remember. It's almost photographic in there. And it's because the imagination is not fanciful as it's made to seem. And that's a lot of the programming is where, even when I say imagination, you think DreamWorks and you think Disney. And that shows us the encoding that's been done on the word. But the truth is that the imagination was our original tool as ancients to actually project. It's from our inception. The term is inception. This is when you conceive an idea internally first, which is where it all starts. And then you concept, meaning that now you're going to birth it into the physical plane. And the imagination is the key component that's responsible for those kind of actions and activities. So if the imagination is hijacked and the person believes that it's all fanciful, then they actually won't believe that they have much manifestation power and control over anything in the physical plane. But as that grows and that imagination starts coming to use, then what you're more tied into is the building blocks of the reality, like how something goes from nothing. And, how do you get the desired effect that you're looking for? And then again, the imagination becomes the key component to doing that, because you can build an entire construct. And this is because we have, we again call it the projector, holographic projector, in our own consciousness. Like many people think that we're actually inside of a hologram, okay? But that's the external side again. The internal side lets us see that in the frontal lobe, the corpus callosum, in the pineal gland, all this equipment, if you may, is used to project realities. We do it when we go to sleep, and we're doing it when we're awake. So when we get control of that system again, then there's really no limits to what can be manifested. And that's really what the ancients were into, is that external manifestation and creating things like beetles and jaguars and those kind of things, rather than PlayStations and iPhone 6s, etc. So, that's one of the big keys is getting your imagination back and realizing how powerful it is. Even to the aspect of a simple technique is putting on some earplugs, and to the point where you can actually hear your own frequency, and you'll hear this ringing. And this depends on, how high a person's frequency is, but they'll hear this ringing, and it's not tinnitus. It's actually the person's personal frequency. And through your imagination, you can actually raise that frequency. You can hear the tone going higher and higher based on your own thought of, hey, this tone should go higher. And then, but when you're doing that, you're also simultaneously increasing the vibratory field in your body. So this is literally the spaceship. We're inside of it, but we've, in a certain sense, lost the ability in some way or another of how to actually really utilize it for its true potential. But now we're getting back into that because of a deep secret, which I mentioned on one of my last shows. But it's basically that, so what technology is, it's very demonized, especially within this conscious structure. I mean, the people who will demonize it are the same ones that do it over a telephone, or they do it over Facebook. So it's kind of oxymoronic. But the truth is that there's nothing that's in this reality that's not taken from the organic life form. So, of course, the camera is the eye, the antennas are the hair, and it goes on and on and on. Cars are almost like a direct replication of the body, from the motor to the generator to every single thing else. So this means that when you come into the realization of that, as this what they would say is more advanced technology comes out, for those who know how to decipher it with the as above, so below blueprint, you start to get the keys to the secret levels of how the spirit works and how light works and those kind of things. So what I feel like personally is in 2016, we're going to see the grand unfoldment of many things. 2015 was a very powerful year, whether people feel like that or not. But 2016, because this is exponential and it's quantum, will deliver even more. But many people are in fear of that, because they think that it's just going to be only in one level, that we're just going to see more control from the controllers. But where there is darkness, there will be light. This is physics. So what happens is that there's still a large repository, if you may, or a receptacle, if you may, of this powerful energy that is yet to be used by those who really understand how to convert it into something that we can actually use in this reality. So I'll close that thought by saying it's the same thing when you come into the face of all-seeing, all-knowing being that you are. There's a real vivid energetic potential to this. This is not fanciful. So in many tenses that you actually feel this energy coursing through the body, and then you see the entire reality coming alive on you. But more is the energy is what I'm wanting to tap into here to let people understand. So once you start feeling that energy, then you realize, man, there's nothing that can't really be done but with just one being. Now, you can do things for yourself. You can metamorphosize your entire reality. But if we're talking about doing this on a worldwide scale with 7 billion people, then of course, others are going to have to be taught these energetic dynamics. And then once that happens, then it's very catchy. It's literally even to the point of contact, and it's called Shakti, to where a person literally receives a boost of energy based on the connection that another person may give to them. And this could be done through words. This can be transmitted through the frontal lobe. This can be transmitted in ways that even transcend space and time. And so this is even what's happening during this conversation now, that the more that the person hears what they already know, that they're just remembering, as in putting back on their members, the more that they start to gauge the ramifications of what I'm discussing here, then it enlivens us. Just as when a person hears one of these very profound messages, they walk away from that message with some level of energetic potential and some level of encouragement. So we have to begin to realize that even if I said, you won the lottery, man, and you're 100% sure that I'm telling you the truth. I'm the lottery guy. I'm calling you. You bought the ticket yesterday. I repeat the numbers off to you. You won. To kind of be the worst prank. I don't want to give you pranksters an idea around here. But if that happened, you wouldn't be able to sleep that night. I mean, the level of energy that you would feel. And this is all based on just an idea. There's nothing that has transpired there except for the fact that you fully believe that tomorrow you're going to have millions of dollars. So we have to realize that, of course, that the currency, as they call it, has replaced our energetic potential within our body. So if we don't have a lot of money, sometimes we don't even feel like leaving the house. Sometimes it limits what we're capable of doing. But the true currency is within our own consciousness and the power within our system. So a lot of what we teach it gives the persons the step-by-step process of how to start building that current. So that way also you get familiar with it, because there's also another situation that occurs that if a person happens to get a lot of currency all of a sudden, let's not say just monetarily, even though we've seen what that looks like, but even physically, if a lot of energy starts to course through your body, then it could become almost a horrific experience, because the body is just not familiar with being in that particular spectrum and in that particular wavelength. So this is something that, as I say, the universe is a university. Earth is just one of my classrooms. And through this experience, I'm learning, now that I'm just into the components of building self and the realization that all is self, I can help more people if I've completely perfected myself to my level of perfection. Then now I can begin to share that energy and share that knowledge in a very accurate way.
Man, yeah, that idea of hijacking our imagination, that adds a whole new level to the role of Hollywood in the system. I mean, to build up forms in our minds before our imagination can really get to work. I mean, all anyone's really talking about now is the Star Wars movie coming out again, right. And it just seems like that same kind of thing. And I've also had people talk to me about this connection that science seems to be actually coming to, where they see a connection between video games and people who are big gamers and the inability to lucid dream. And there might be something to projecting our consciousness into an avatar on the television screen that hinders our ability to actually take control of our own avatar in the dream world. It's kind of interesting. I think you're onto something there. I think there really is a relationship. And this thing you mentioned about our financial currency being connected to the energetic potential that we have inside of our body. I've heard you say that before. I found it really interesting, but I'm curious, why do we see so many elite, so many of the nefarious members of the power pyramid, very rich in physical currency, but they don't seem too spiritually evolved?
Yeah, because they invert the current. So, but first I want to get to you mentioned something even deeper, and it's just about the avatar. I just have to, confess that I've been a big gamer for years, and it's just,
Me too,
we grew up in a certain culture, and that culture presents an outlet by allowing us to tap into a virtual reality. Of course, now more so than ever with Oculus Rift and these kind of things. But if we really want to understand what's going on with archetypes and, again, hijacking consciousness and actually diverting energy, there's a lot I actually did a full elaboration on this, and it's called deprogramming. But what it's really about is how the system, and I'll just go through this as fast as possible, but the system that we're talking about, the U.S. educational system, comes from Prussia. And the Prussian situation, which occurred during the Prussian War, which they lost, was after losing the war, let's say the officials, the king brings everyone in, hey, why did we lose the war? And what's reported is that the soldiers are basically not taking orders. They're not following orders. They basically can't be commanded to go in to die. So they said, well, we need to, revamp the entire system, and we need to start from when they're younger, and then we need to incorporate a system that basically makes them subservient to the king, just like accepted masonry is to be an oath to the king. So from that point on, even in our educational system, we had no such thing as a doctor's degree or a master's degree before we actually took on the Prussian system. And the first PhDs and doctor's degrees that were issued in the United States of America came from those that were educated in Prussia, such as Horace Mann and many other individuals. So from there, you also still had in the Prussian system brothers Grimm, who were actually creating large dictionaries in attempts to use the English language for nefarious purposes and linking what was in the English language into the Old Norse traditions of Wotan and the king and, the hunt and all these kind of things, which, it's actually a message that I'm going to bring this Saturday because it's Christmas. It centers a lot around holidays, and it centers a lot around these characters that were given in folklore and in fairy tales, and how those characters ride with us for a prolonged period of time, almost until death. And these rituals that take place, which is basically even tuning in at a certain time, or, Christmas is always on the same day, and those kinds of rituals are really tying us into a lack of creativity, because of course there are things to be observed on those days. There's astronomical alignments, winter solstice, etc. But when's the last time that we actually decided what we were going to do those days and how that was going to really work? So that's the first thing, is to, a big part of being innovative or a pioneer means that you actually begin to create something somewhat new as possible. And because we've been in this old mold for this prolonged period, adapting basically a maniacal death culture, then right now we're encouraged to begin to, come out of that whole shepherd's fold and start to really be innovative and creative with what we're doing. And we can use all these things as tools, because the same thing to me, I never felt like personally that, well, there are some very dark games, but I do feel like that my consciousness, as far as how fast I could react, how much that I could really perceive, was enhanced through gameplay, because the reality is very illusory and very game-like before a person actually gets to the meat of what's really happening here. And in that, so chess, which I play also, it has a certain combination of moves, that the pieces can do certain things, but it's nothing like, let's say, Call of Duty, where you have a whole entire arsenal. But what I'm saying is that you have more integers in which to plug in. And for the person that goes hyper with their consciousness, which is what I did, I found that ability to immerse into virtual reality, let's say, was accompanied, once I let most of that go, with being able to lucid dream. And when I figured out, which I was doing this as a child, even before I started playing games, I was lucid dreaming. And then when I was in my teens, I seemed to lose that ability, and I think we can accredit that to the hijacking of our consciousness. But then that returned at a certain point to where I realized, man, I can control my dreams. And then even the realization of that, which, we take for granted that everyone is aware of that. Even some people, even when they hear about that they can do it, They do it the first night. Now, they may have a hard time doing it the second night and the third night, but it's something that once you figure out that you can do, then it taps you into an entirely different way of utilizing your consciousness. And in that, you can use your body, well, in this case, your RAN, your spiritual vehicle, to go and fetch information for you, to immerse yourself into something that could take you lifetimes to learn, but you can do it all in one night. So that's really what I want to say about that specific part of our consciousness that does go out voyeurly into other realms and other dimensions. And, once we get beyond just, EA games, that Saturn challenging everything, and we get into realizing that, look, all this stuff connects. There's nothing here that doesn't have a real, like Sony is Scion. You move the Y into an I, move the letters around, there you have it. Scion is also 2012. You turn the letters, and this is how the English language works. It's a code, because the people who built this language were cloak and dagger. They were they used clandestine methods. They were deep into the symbolism and the encoding and to working others' consciousness with this program that we're calling English. So there's also a lot to be revealed when it's not just our enemy, because there's two sides to everything. It's, we're encouraged to search for the other side of things and not just, judge things one way and not find that match or that pair, because everything in the dualistic reality will have it. So what I found in one of the major advents of my awakening, which is why I wrote the book, The Code to the Matrix, was the keys within the English language, because language can't actually be changed very fast. So you can't just erase a person's language and then plug in a new one. You have to make a complete transition. So when you start studying the language, the English language, it starts to tell a story. And then this story starts leading you into the total realization. And then you can even jump into languages that are a little bit before English, like Latin, and then continue that story all the way back until you're in ancient Sumerian, and you're at the root to what this story is really about and what language is really about, which is worlds. As they say, words, you add an L, which is generally a right angle, which means a God entering a realm, you get worlds. So when a person that has power knows how to use words the proper way, they build worlds. And that world, as we're seeing it, it's the same word world, WHIRL, meaning to spin. And that same spinning motion, which is phi, is how things are created. So this is what we're saying about how the knowledge will confirm itself. Then you no longer need, some guru or some master or whatever, giving you parts of the truth or selling you the truth, etc., because you have what's necessary to actually get, to get what you need out of any situation. So moving on, the difference between current and currency within the so-called elite is because, first of all, they've invented a falsified system known as money, and we don't need to go into that because everyone's pretty much aware of that now. So, of course, they can print and manufacture as much of this stuff as they want to appear as if they're elated over all others, because mainly spiritual people don't have that same connection with financial gain, because this means that they have to get deep into the system, and the system doesn't really allot those kind of things. So that's the first explanation, but it's still not the complete thing, because there are people who, when activating themselves, are able to generate current within the body, and then that current simultaneously manifests as actual physical money too. I mean, it's just abundance. Let's just not narrow it down to just money. It becomes children. It becomes land. It becomes trees that are fruitful. It becomes rivers that have running water coming through them. So money is not the only check for whether a person is actually abundant. And also with the controllers, just to understand what gives them this power, if you may, is because they invert their kundalini. And this is what you learn in the ancient traditions, is that obviously the kundalini is in the base of the spine. It has retreated from the temple or the corpus callosum, or the top area of the brain, the crown, if you may, and it has tucked itself down into the spine and coiled itself up. So what you will see in dark rituals and rituals that involve, let's say, sex magic and those kind of things, kind of what Crawley brought forth, which of course was very instrumental in the development of Hollywood, etc. But you see through those rituals that they are inverted, and that's why their symbol is an inverted pentagram, because the pentagram is a symbol of man, mainly the pentagram with the curved edges. It's the same pattern that Venus is tracing out in the night sky. It doesn't look like the pentagram that they draw with the straight lines. It's the pentagram that you see in flowers and sand dollars, that kind of pentagram. And there's a big difference. But what they show when they invert the pentagram is they're saying that we're basically turning the world upside down. We're turning man upside down. And there's Masonic images with the man hanging upside down, aka the hanged man. And when that happens, the Kundalini, instead of making the ascent up the spine and into the crown, and then beyond the crown, sitting into the invisible areas on the top of the head, it goes down first, and it goes dual, and that's the two legs. It goes dual into the legs and then down into the sole of the feet. And then what happens then is now the person, and there's a whole lineup of these kind of people, and when you know about this kind of stuff, you know who has inverted Kundalini. And so in this lineup, what you have then is you have basically people who've tapped into the demonic side of themselves. As the word demon means a divided man, daemon or a daimon. Okay, so a divided consciousness, and that's because the consciousness is not residing to where it's unified, which is in the top in the crown. It's dualistic, which is in the legs. And so the body is the symbol. That's why the pentagram has those 2 points on the bottom. That's duality. So when the person goes into that stage of consciousness, now they're very warlike. And in that warlike kind of structure, and what I'm getting to here is that with this inverted Kundalini, then what they'll attempt to do, and this is what the world is kind of centered around, this is the key point to this, is debase everyone. Because if they can push everyone down lower than where they are, then they have power over them. And this is why you see that in the tarot card, the devil's got the man and the woman chained to him. Okay? And so what the metaphor is behind this is that if a person is made to feel like they are even lower than God, okay, because God is a specific being. It's the Germanic god Gud, who was a king and an Aesir. He is Oz, which is his other name, or Odin, a.k.a. Santa Claus. Okay, so this is all the same character. He has many names. And it's just the same thing that interacts in the reality now with the royalty, a.k.a. wannabe royalty kings, wanting to push everyone else down. Oh, we're the only kings. We're the only royalty. This is that program. And so when people believe in that through the conditioning and even through programming and suggestion, then this is what makes them not as powerful as someone who's even got inverted Kundalini. So this is the answer to why you see, Madonna, you name it, being so prosperous while, Sister Betty, who seems like the greatest person in the world, is struggling even trying to pay rent. And this is because still the same concept that's infecting Sister Betty, which may even be religion, is something that they have overcome because they created religions. Religion is only the deification of a culture. So this is how deep it gets. It gets into the languages, and that's why the term deprogramming is not, a snap of the finger like, I love like a genie or I love genie, and then everything's going to change. This means a step-by-step methodical approach to remove the virus from our consciousness without destroying the host. Because that's the other component. Because if you remove something, and this is why a lot of my message in the beginning, and this again 7 years, was centered around revealing the true identity behind the characters in the religions. But I quickly figured out, well, I don't know how quick it was because I think it was like 3 years, but I figured out that this wasn't actually the best way to really come at explaining to people the depth of the programming that they were experiencing, because it immediately got them into conflict, because they can't actually let go of that easy. Because when you take something like that's the foundation, if you may, of a person's consciousness. So you pull the foundation up, now they don't have anything to stand on. So if you're not really quick at putting something there, which would be them, because you don't want to put another God there, you don't want to put another story there, then you find that the person becomes very demoralized. And only few make it. It's like almost self-substantiation. You're basically telling this person that there's now no longer an external God and that they are God, but they don't have any real idea of what that's supposed to even be like. So we talk first about, first get into your body and actually get this stuff cleaned out so you can feel your power and your energy. And then we'll start working with taking apart some of these, what you would see is the archonic structures, as we mentioned earlier, you mentioned earlier in the conversation, and this programming that has gone on within the mind that has literally set up a fictitious world in which the person exists in.
Mm-hmm. Man. Well said. And I have to admit, I'm definitely still somewhat stuck in that identification phase. I'm always trying to determine, who is the apex of the capstone of the pyramid. And you're right. I mean, it's ultimately not super important. But I do have a curiosity, since we're on the subject. Sure. Do you see them, the people that are inverting the pentagram and carrying on these rituals and basically inverting the current, as you said, do you see them as subconsciously possessed in a sense by archons, or is there more of a conscious partnership between them and some nefarious force that's unseen?
Okay, well, let's simplify it if we can. So that in the spectrum, on one side, let's say color. Okay, let's back up a little bit here. Okay, so everything can also be defined in the physical reality as a color. So in the ancient system, there's 9 colors, not 7. Everyone's familiar with the 7 colors, but they don't realize that there's 2 other colors that we see every day that gives us the key to things. And this is why even in masonry, there's a black and white checkerboard. But when you go to school, they say that white is the absence of color. And they actually say black is the same thing. Or right. If not, maybe a combination of all colors. But the truth is, black and white are also colors. Clear, which we are also aware of, when water is clean or when glass we can see through it, is the absence of color. So this is the first thing to the part of deprogramming what exactly is going on with the consciousness and how that is affecting us. So when we see that spectrum, we see also that how the reality works is it pairs this. You don't see any batteries with just a positive side. You don't see them with a negative side only. They have to have both. And when those two come together, they create a spark. Just like if you slap 2 wires together, one on the positive and one on the negative, if there's enough juice in there, it's going to create a spark. And that spark we call life. That's actually how we come into existence in the physical planes, is through that spark. So just from that level alone, we can see that there is a use for these 2 opposing forces. So we also see, though, is how sacred creation is. And this is why creation, like creating babies, having sex, or what's called six, those kind of activities in all spiritual structures are the most taboo, off-limits parts of the entire system. Even, the whole ideification of what's going on with the serpent in the beginning of the book of the Bible is that, now they're naked and now they're having sex, and this is the worst thing. So you can see within all these structures, it's the act of creation that is seen as being the most taboo and off limits. And there's a reason for that. And it's because if somehow we start creating, but we don't realize the power within our creation, then we get worlds like we have right now, to where even there's children being born every day. It's the most powerful thing we could ever create, is our children. And when a child is born, and if it's not reared properly, you're dealing with a monster, because the child doesn't actually understand how to keep this magnificent vehicle in balance, right? So to answer your question then is that since you have this wavelength where on one end there's what we call darkness and on the other end there's what we call light, if one gravitates more into the areas of darkness, what they take on is they take on the frequency. So rather than trying to put a face on it, like, anything, there's tons of creatures that they would love to put a face onto this darkness. It's really an all-pervading frequency that if anyone, I don't care who you are, if you start to wander down into that tone and vibration, you're going to become it, and it's going to become you. So what also happens is that being able to pull yourself back into balance, because obviously it's not about being good or bad. And that's what many people don't get. They don't actually even get that this quote unquote good is just as equal to the bad. Mm-hmm. And this is because they don't have a real idea of what balance is. And that's why in the Hermetic traditions, in the rod of Hermes, the staff of Hermes was a balancing rod. You see the two snakes, then the pole going up the center, and then the globe. That's actually a actual symbol for man and woman. That's a symbol for a human being. And the straight and narrow path is the center of the spine going straight up into the globe or the brain or where the consciousness resides. But if you go the zigzag path, these are what they say is the path of the serpents, then that's duality. And that's actually how the chakras work. One's on one side of the body, one's on the other, and then you basically zigzag up the body, and obviously that's the longest way to getting into the top of your consciousness. So what happens is that through polarity, many of these people that we're calling evil, they're stuck into a certain pole. And now they're playing that role. That's even almost the same word. And they're playing the role to be the diametric opposition to what's on the other side. They're just taking that role in that character. But this is the game. That's why they say in the end of the game, the king and the pawn go back into the same box. Now, that's one of the most powerful sayings because it actually is a metaphor for the world and its fictitious incubation periods of when this duality is going on and one is perceived to be greater than the other when they're all actually coming from the same thing. So what we talk about is we talk about finding that balance and actually being able to define what it is to become the master of your own universe. So then you're the one that is judging. You're judging over your own body and your temples, which is half is the king, half is the priest. This is why they call the temple of the body. One is a king, the other one is the priest. Some people call that one is logical, one is spiritual. This is a product of the languages that we've used throughout the timeline. Demotic script, hieratic script. One is to use to write laws, rules, certifications. That's the king stuff, right? He's always like borders, tickets. All that was one particular kind of language. While the priest wrote in all the holy books, the spells, the curses, spiritual knowledge was written in another language. And so this is even how the world is divided. Like, let's say Latin is a language written by priests. So that's why it's much more into the whole Catholicism and, there's a God as a central figure and all the words kind of lead to that. Versus German was written by the king. So that's why those people are much more logical and methodical with technology, etc. So by the program, because we can't overlook, well, how is everyone communicating even to themselves? And then when you start realizing the roles of each of these characters, you can go back to things like the Bible, and then you can see, well, God, who was the king, was in the company of the angels, which was the aristocracy, and said, let us go forth from here, let's ride out through the land, and let's confuse these people who are building this temple. These people were building their own temple. Like they were focused on themselves and their expansion and enlightenment. And let's confuse them with what? Language. So now in the world, it doesn't matter. Like right now, even this message that I'm transmitting right now, which is extremely powerful to certain people who speak English and can comprehend what I'm saying, means nothing to a Chinese person. Right. That cannot speak English. So this is our barrier. This is the barrier of the wall. And it's, and it's redundant. And so we're encouraged to break down these walls and these structures and to get ourselves into a much more vast state of consciousness by unlocking these powers and abilities. Because make no mistake, my friend, that what happens is that when you begin to unlock this power within yourself, that's what the X-Men really is. That's what these evolutionary triggers are really about. They're to keep a person from the total realization that they can bend space-time, that they can lift and morph other objects, because how this works, just to make it short, so people may think, this is fanciful. It's not fanciful at all. In fact, this is much more solid than most of the stuff that we're standing on. All the objects that are in matrices have a level of sentience. In fact, many of them are more sentient than people that think. But their sentience is still telling them, I'm iron. I'm iron. Not that I'm everything. So this is why we can also be very grateful in a tense for this stage that we've reached, because now we're at the brink of the total concept of who we really are, which is everything, but we have to make that leap. Versus things that are more dense. That's why stones are very dense. Even though they're foundational, they're strong, we can stand on them, they're also very difficult to budge and to move. Like trying to walk through a steel wall, you prove to be very difficult versus trying to walk through a wall of water. You see, because steel is more dense. So what happens though is, for the being that knows that they're everything, steel is now inferior to that being. It's just the level of the hierarchy, let's say. It's now inferior to that being, because that being believes they're everything versus this being has identified itself as one thing. So when it comes time to walk through it, it's the same phenomena that happens when a person takes a substance that's more real than they are. Like ayahuasca is more real than most humans on the planet, because ayahuasca is transcending space-time, connected through the root system of this planet and probably thousands of other planets, coursing through other people's veins. So it knows what it is. It's just the human that's been in Welfenschaunkrieg or Western programming, and they still confused to who they're going to be this life. So when it's time for a human being under Western programming to meet ayahuasca who transcends space-time, you'll see very fast that the human being is overridden. And now their consciousness becomes a part of this vast neural network, to where they're beholding even the holiest of holies and beyond. So it's the same thing with the steel wall. To a human being that doesn't believe that they're not steel too, and all of the other elements, they're easily able to walk through. It has to give passage, because this is more of physics than it is actual spirituality. Even though, the two go hand in hand. They call that metaphysics, right?
Damn. That is just so much material. I love it. It's hard to determine exactly where to go, but you're mentioning consciousness or the intelligence of all matter, even things that are not traditionally considered alive.
Right.
What about animals? Have you ever delved into psychic communication with animals or anything like that? Everyone wants to know what their dog is thinking. And I feel like if we're really breaking down the paradigm, there has to be some kind of role for the consciousness of animals.
For sure. Let me. I just take notes, that way I don't actually skip anything. But so first of all, let's debunk very briefly that something has to think in order to be sentient. Because what happened is that we started thinking that because we think, that makes us smart. And because we reason, then that makes us intelligent. And this gives us a superiority over all elements. Anyone that understands real transcendental consciousness, meditation, etc., this is foolishness if they've had a breakthrough. Why? Because in order to enter Zen, you actually have to not think. Even a NFL player, basketball player knows, in order for them to get into the zone, which is the same as Zen, that they can't actually be thinking, okay, I'm going to shoot this ball, it's going to go into the hole. They actually get into this phase to where they get beyond their thoughts, and then they act before they think. Because the thinking is what tumbles everything down, right? So that proves right there that just because something is thinking doesn't mean that it's number one on the list for being the most sentient. So then when we look at crystals and other elements that don't do this quote-unquote thinking, we can now assume from that realization that these things are probably more intelligent than we are. And in fact, in most cases, they are. And that's why you can really gather a lot of information. Like, it's not just about even just trees and ayahuasca DMT. It's actually a hierarchy within nature to where animals, let's say where animals are on the hierarchy, are directly above. Well, let me get the hierarchy straight here. So we have, let me just start it from scratch. You have the elements such as the minerals. Mm-hmm. Then you have, I haven't gone over the hierarchy in a long time. You see, I'm out of the hierarchical structure. But okay, so what you have is
No worries,
you have.
man. I can take that part out. I can take a little part out of if you need to take a second to think about it.
Well, I mean, no. Let's just go with it. I mean, people can understand how difficult it is to get over this stuff, and they should know that I'm human. So it's like, what? Is it a machine? Is this a machine over here? But the hierarchical structure is based on how dense the objects and the elements are. And obviously, we have the mineral kingdom, we have the plant kingdom, we have the animal kingdom, and then we have human beings, which are very close to the animal kingdom. So in that hierarchy, this is also how we can gauge pureness of thought or pureness of consciousness. And so just to answer the question, what are animals in this? So in the constellations, as we talked about earlier, the star systems, you have star systems that are directly related to the animals. And this is why they do like a dot to dot even with the stars. And they're like, oh yeah, that's Lepus and the rabbit. And this is, the dog. This is Canis Major. And this is because it's really like that these animals actually have an oversoul, just like we have that oversoul. And they're dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with now in the disconnection process. Meaning that even the cat that's running around is not fully aware that what it is on the totality scale. Now, if we gave the cat some DMT, I'm joking, but you could see what we would be dealing with. It would go into another hyper level potential of what it's capable of doing, or it would slip a gear. It would not be conscious of, it would go crazy, basically. So this is the phenomena that we're experiencing with the animals. So, but the thing about the animals, though, because I'm not saying one is greater than the other. That's nothing about what this hierarchy is really about, because if you move one thing out of the way, it's like a house of cards. It all falls down. Like we experience this with extinction. If we move air, we'll just all die. So it's not about what's greater. It's about what role it's actually serving. So what we find with the animal kingdom is that they are a lot more consistent. So do you see what this is all about, Greg? It's about if we don't have a foundation, then we can't stand. There's no realities if something is not there all the time saying and projecting that the reality actually exists. So we do that on a collective level. I'm going to simplify this. So the insects at nighttime, let's say when they get into the chirping, there's a certain frequency, and that frequency holds a specific level. Even the heartbeat of many animals that are beating all the time all around the world, that holds a specific level. So what we have is we have something similar to what a pyramid looks like, to where if you remove any of those layers completely, then the entire structure is going to collapse. And so what animals are is they're the path, because that's what all the elements are. They are the transition from light into matter. And it's almost like a smear or in slow-mo, to where one level of animal, insect, metal, you name it, is the part of that process of coming from light into matter. It's just like where it was frozen at. Mm-hmm. And so what we have within these animals, let's say, for instance, the dog is very similar and very close to the human being. It has a level of sentience and a level of consciousness. And this is because in the races of people, there are races who have more of a connection with the canine, or what's known as Canaan, which is CNN, than all the other races. Why other races may have more connection with the boar. Now, This is what's called a totem. So when we study the totem, we find out that what the indigenous and the ancient people did was they knew where their soul family was. Like basically what pathway did you take to come into incarnation? Because you have to take on these bodies. So you could come through, let's say, Polyrachus ant to a golden beetle to a hawk to a koala bear, then to a German shepherd, then to a black man. You see what I mean? So that's the path. And then what happens is that the ancient cultures, they knew their path. Like the Kemetans had a strong path coming from lions. So that's why they put the Sphinx out there with the man body. It was to show that the blend was these particular entities on a spiritual level. Because the reason why I was kind of hesitating in the beginning about this is because this is now a depth level stuff. In the depth level arena, it says, we have the souls bring the bodies, meaning that the bodies are filled, they're like vessels, so they're filled with soul force. So a whale is carrying a huge soul. So we can, in a tense, break the whale down into several dolphins if we're talking about souls, soul force. So this is what the ancestors spent their time doing. This is like ancestral PlayStation. You take certain percentages of the soul. They could melt the ka with ether. This is what you read in some of the deep ancient books, that the ka or the spirit can be cut with aether. And they would cut it, and then they would inhabit certain levels of consciousness, because you can't put a whale soul in a beetle body. So also this gives us, even knowing this knowledge, gives us a big connection with, well, where's a lot of this soul stuff coming from, and how is it making its transcendence? Well, the dinosaurs had huge souls. So when they left those physical bodies, just like when we leave the physical body, there will be a soul still there, because the soul never perishes. Now that soul will try to fit itself into another life form. And so this is the process that we'll be dealing with. So that life form will become more numerous. You may find billions of cats that may have come from one genetic family member. Because as we see that we can trace, first of all, the cat is a composition of a snake and a lion. So that lets us know right there. Look at the cat. The cat has snake eyes. Lions don't have those kind of eyes. They don't have convex eyes. Lions have circular eyes like dogs. Right. Snakes have convex eyes. But the cat is clearly in a feline or lion-like body. Bam. It lets you see right there something that is perceived impossible, is what they're telling us in science, because they're just not saying everything. It's been done. You've made a reptile with a mammal. So the Kemetans, I don't use the term Egyptian because Egyptian's a term that comes way later on. The Kemetans were already familiar with how to mix animals and life forms on a soul level, not on a physical, not in the petri dish and all that. No, they were dealing with the kas. Wow. And with that process, they genetically, if you want to say genetic modification, but we're not talking about a GMO here. We're talking about a paradise, a place to where all types of forms and creations are mixed together in order to create different variations. And the reason why this was possible is because it was witnessed in the stars. Because what happens with stars, the light that comes from stars, it blends together. There's not really a conflict. There's a mixture of light. So how that interacts on the physical plane is that you find 2 forms, 3 forms, even 10 forms coming together to form something that actually contains all these different variations. Hence, man and woman, who are a combination of multiple beings and even elements, all operating inside of one sphere. Hence the term universe. United, uni, in conflict, verse. Now this conflict, like versus, him versus her, and this conflict comes from the consciousness trying to figure out who's in control though. So the greatest war we face is actually within, because the mouth even is going to war with the stomach. The taste buds may want Coca-Cola, but the liver definitely doesn't want it. So this is how boiled down this conflict actually gets. So the key to being a human being in harmony was to actually find the balance, to create the balance. This was known as the greatest being that could ever walk any plane, was the one who had taken all these forces and put them into balance. Mm-hmm. And then this word comes in, harmony. And this is why they took this term harmony and they reconstrued it to be a part of the fallen angels. Like the fallen angels make this oath together on the Mount Harmon, which is where our word harmony comes from, that they would do this thing, which was to actually create man, and that they needed to all blend together in order to actually create, because each one of them only contained certain aspects. So water will always be water. Fire will always be fire. This is why they say, it was a combination or harmonization of the elements. That's alchemy. That actually brings us into what's called, in alchemy, not only the panacea, or it's called the quintessence. This is basically that someone had figured out how to put all of this stuff together in an imbalance, and then out comes this being known as man and woman. But balance, if you ask anyone who knows how to, that walks the tightrope, it's a consistent thing. You don't actually just balance and then it's like, okay, I'm balanced, I'm done. Right. Balance is something that you have to constantly keep going. So this is like, there's always pros and cons that they say. So the con of this is that we have to constantly work on keeping the body balanced when we're in physical planes. And, and that when coming off balance, you get situations like this 23.5 degree wobble. I believe it's 26 or 23.5 degree wobble that's going on Earth. The Earth is tilted, right? So what this causes is it causes us to use one side of our body more than another. Generally, most people are right-handed. Okay? Yeah. So that imbalance, if the world would put itself back on balance, right? And this is the big thing. If we put it back on balance, it spins faster. Because when you take anything off balance, like a wheel, like, if you got a whopped wheel on your car, it burns up more gas, it can't go as fast, et cetera, et cetera. So if we put Earth back on balance, we correct the tilt, the Earth begins to speed up. So then what happens to all the beings that live on the planet is their frequency raises. When they come into the total harmonic, which is like 528 hertz, it's what you see even in cymatics. It creates this HUD. It creates a field of complete harmony. Then all of a sudden, everyone can communicate with each other again.
Wow.
Because, well, yeah, there it is. But that's like the pure optimistic, which is not fanciful, idea of what we can actually create here. Yeah. Because when we come all back into full communication, this means that you actually know what the tree is saying. You actually know what the animals are saying. And no one's actually trying to do something that is uncomfortable for the other, because we're all on that same harmonic. Mm-hmm. And when we're dealing with disharmonics, like what's going on in the reality right now, then we lose our connection with each other. So you see how, I brought it into a complete circle. Our disconnection is because when we slow down, when our frequencies are too low, it's interrupted. We can't understand what's going on. Versus when we build up that frequency, whatever you're using to increase your frequency, you start to realize, oh my goodness, it's all alive. Oh my goodness, there's more to this than what I really thought. Oh my goodness, this person is really in pain. Oh my goodness, these trees are dying. And you can feel that, because feeling is communication. You see, like some people say, well, I'm an empath. Well, empathic over to that tree then. Empathic over to that animal then. Because if you're empath, you can feel that animal and that tree are suffering. And so, but when you can feel that, naturally we don't want anything to suffer. Just like we don't want, and I got to laugh about this because I wanted to bring something up. Because I think M. Night Shyamalan has a new movie out. And I happened to mistakenly watch the preview. And in the preview, there's this creature scratching up the wall and going all around, the whole horror thing. Now, people like to play like they actually like that stuff. But I tell you the truth, if someone had that thing in real life running around their house, it would be over. So It shows us that our natural inclination is not really to gravitate towards this new form of darkness, which we can't even call negativity. Negativity is more like the womb. Negativity is more like the darkness you see in the ocean. Negativity is more like that other side of the battery. But if we somehow confuse negativity for evil, now we got a problem. You see, so this is how English does, is it piggybacks words that don't have anything to do with each other, onto each other. So if I say, man, that's negative to everyone else, that means that that's bad. But what if I'm just trying to describe the opposite polarity? Like woman is known to be negative, the negative pole. It receives versus man is positive. It puts in. So it's like, you see, that's what we're talking about. And so you can see how much damage has really been done with our race, because the only race is the human race. And you could see how much damage has been done because every single topic that we've touched on today, which we could go on hours about just one of them, is an aspect of us that needs to be put back into balance, and some full understanding must be gained. But again, it's a ladder. That's what they call it. It's like Mount Meru. You climb the ladder, and while you're climbing the ladder, this is not slip and slide. So this doesn't mean that, you just slide down the hill. It's going to be easy. It means that the climb up the ladder is a bit tough, but there's a great reward. And that ladder, of course, is our spine. And so we just talk about, climb your spine. Let the energy and the creative force and the juices flow back up the spine into the crown, and then let it make its transcendence.
Yeah. Wow, man. I'm so glad I asked you about animals, because that opened up so much.
Yeah, we got a lot out of that, right?
Yeah, and maybe that does explain the ancient coat of arms and the crests and the Parthenon of the Egyptian gods, all the hybrids. I think that's really interesting. And I've heard you say you can't be stumped. So I wanted to ask you about something that I hadn't heard before. And, it sounds as thoughtful as ever. But to get back to balance, because that seems to be what it all comes down to, the talk about the wobble of the earth, I think, is super fascinating. And I guess I'm curious how we can get the earth back in balance. Is the balance determined by the totality of the human consciousness? Or another question would be, was there perhaps a time in the past when we always hear that the ancients were more in tune and with their consciousness? Could there have been a time in the past where there was no wobble?
Oh, for sure, because the wobble is a direct reflection of what's actually happening within our consciousness. And so we did a lot of maintenance to any collective projection, because it's like our baby. Like the earth is like, we manifested this, so it's like our baby. If you create a baby, you're going to be responsible for it. So since we all created it together, it was all our responsibility to keep it maintained. And that was super simple. It's like if we were all working on keeping earth clean, it would never be dirty. It's just enough of us here to keep it in balance and to keep it straight. And also this connection that we have with this planet, it's profound, like what it has really to deliver, like what animals really are when you see their light form, what trees are really, what they really are when you see their light form. Because like right now, we're just seeing their dense growth aspect. So what happens is that I always have the saying, the saying is the strongest mind wins. Because whatever the strongest mind or program that's being broadcasted in the matrix, whatever it's conceiving is actually where the flow goes. And so that's why there's so much programming going on with everyone's consciousness, because with 7 billion people, the consciousness must be controlled in a sense by these controllers to keep Earth from emancipating itself, basically. In this harmony, again, it's like even in our wildest dreams and the greatest utopia that we can ever think of doesn't even begin to scratch the surface, because we've created so much separation within our existence. Like, just imagine us all connecting on an entirely different level, and it's orgasmic. So it's not as gross, not of a gross nature like physical sexual interaction, but it's on a light level of a connection that we share an energy that allows us to balance the load of that energy. Because let's just face it, if one person on the planet has all the energy on the planet, they can't hold that energy. So this is also one of the mysteries about how this system works. See, these so-called controllers, they don't have power because they can't hold power. Their power is in electricity, oil, those kind of things. That's their powers. It's not in this, throw lightning from your hand like a Sith Lord. So because that kind of power, you actually have to share it. It's like, that's what you do in circle. That's what, meaning in ayahuasca circles, somebody's playing the generator, somebody's playing the capacitor, somebody's holding space, someone is the bringing in. So we configure ourselves, each human being which we were talking about earlier, each person's special purpose, each human being is configured to do one of those things. And through that, we're able to manage the ship. Each person has their own station. So what happens, though, is if we get off of managing the stations, like we're not concerned about ourselves. See, the thing is that our attention is diverted to be concerned about the society on an external level. If we wanted to fix this reality, we only need to do it on an internal level. Then when we do that, there's a certain percentage. Call it like the 100th monkey syndrome, because the energetics that we're talking about, they're catchy. Mm-hmm. This is why it's like night and day for these people, 24/7. They have to keep, I always call it, 25/8, which is or 28, 25/8. That's the precession of Venus. They have to keep it going, this distraction, because if for one moment, and it's going to break. The thing is that this system will perish. It's guaranteed. And they, if you want to put it in the quote, in the parentheses, they know it. And they're begging for it. It's like someone that wants to be put out of their misery. They already know in time, because time doesn't exist. So time has the barrier and boundaries, that the boundaries will be break. The wineskins will burst. And the more new wine comes in, these are new souls, this old paradigm is under the strain of busting. And this busting doesn't look like one of these dystopian Fallout movies that they keep making. It actually is totally different, because in the event that we're released from this chaos, which broadcasts like a frequency, like they live all around the world, the moment that that's gone, then we easily restore our consciousness and the planet restores itself. And then it becomes a lesson in the university, called the universe, about what happens to when you allow things to get off balance, when you're not maintaining it. And then also the power of our creation. Because a lot of times we create things. Think about how many thoughts and ideas we have. Those are all part of our creation. So we create things, but we don't maintain them. So our ideas can actually run amok. So this is, to me, I have to see the white and the black in everything in order for me to find the balance. And so that's, to me, this experience. And I do believe, because I have all the dynamics, I've seen it already. Like there's no such thing as time. So when you transcend time, when you speed up into a space that doesn't have this whole thing going on. And then when you ask the question, if you ask the question, it responds back. And if you say, well, what's happening here? Why am I in this space and the world's not like this? And it says, because nothing dense is here. There's no tires here. There's no rubber here. There's no oil here. Because everything is on such a higher vibratory frequency, all toxins just dissipate. So it's just like plastic. You can't bring plastic into a certain wavelength. It just disintegrates. It evaporates. So in the place where things evaporate, that's where, if you want to say, true life is. And the reason why you're guaranteed to get there, let me explain why. It's because the body is 70% water. So no matter what, when you supposedly die, which is so fictitious, and they put you in this coffin or whatever, even if you get burned, whatever, 70% of you is already going to rise. Even if they put it in the box, it's going to go right through the box, because water goes right through these objects. And so this is why there's the major connection between the soul and water. That's why we can't live without it. The real supreme beings, because I don't want to use the word God, but for people to simplify, the real gods are the elements we can't do without. Breath, water, those kind of things. Because they're not going to give you an ultimatum. They're not on this, oh, you serve me or I'm going to destroy you. Breath is not going to say, if you don't breathe, I'm going to destroy you. No, that's kind of obvious. If you don't breathe or if you don't drink water. And so that's the true hierarchy, is the elements. So when you look at those elements, you find that they're here to empower you. The clearer your water is, fresh spring water, distilled water, remineralized water, the clearer your breath is, pranayama, taking in the breath of life, or whole body breathing up on the higher on the mountain. That's the real power. And the moment that we realize that power is not electricity and gasoline and money, that's when we turn on what the system, our real vehicle, really runs on. And look at the term, turn on. So what is a turn on? Something you like. So because the field is orgasmic, the entire field is sexual. It's 6. This is why they have the interlacing triangles, the Star of David. I mean, they kill me with always trying. David is another king. The king always wants to take possession of the symbols. The symbol of 6 is sex, which you see in water. It's showing you that the true basis to these kind of dimensions is the connection between two opposing forces and what comes from in the center of that, the birth. So that lets us see that the entire reality is actually sexual. It has an orgasmic or orgone energy, pranic energy that it powers itself off of. But if that connection becomes for us debased, like if we may watch too much porn, or if we don't understand the divine feminine, or we don't understand really the divine masculine, then we can't actually engage in what charges us. You see, so that's actually what's happening, because the more, now let's simplify it. The more a person's in love, I like to call it compassion, the compass to Zion. The more a person's in love with compassion, oh my goodness, you see the most amazing person. They work out. I mean, they're always trying to do their best. So the reality is set up like that to when the illusion dissipates, the only thing that remains is just the orgasmic energy of everyone's connection with one another, the plants, the trees, the whole nine. And then guess what? Nobody is trying to put titles on things like this is mine, or this is a cat, and this is water. Because see, all of those titles are relinquished. And that's where the part of the language comes in as the programming, because what do you see happening in the beginning of this Genesis, right? Of the Genesis, the beginning of the hack. All the animals are named. God tells Adam, go name the animals. So you're seeing this right now. Now, anything that has a name can be owned. That's why BMW, if you use that BMW on your car shop, they're going to sue you. If you use Walmart as your store name, they're going to sue you because they own those names. So in 10 years in the future, are they going to own the name Greg? Is there going to be like Greg's, supermarket, and then if you try to name your stuff Greg, all of a sudden you can't name it? That's your name, though.
Yeah,
but so we can see how language was designed to actually own things or to take command over things. Hey, dog, come here. And dog's even now responding to that name. Hey, James, come here. Now James is even responding to that name. So this is where the barriers come in. So when the barriers drop, no one's actually divided because no one has any titles. You see? And this title, and then the last secret to this, and we're getting a lot out. I know we're kind of nearing the end of the conversation, but it's an explosive conversation.
Yeah,
so the thing about this is one. Okay, now let me show you the secret to the symbols. Now, one is actually not even a real concept. There's not one of anything. There's not one tree. There's not one eyeball. There's not one coffee bean. There's not one of anything. But there is one of something that tries to use that number and identify themselves as that all the time. The king. There's only one king. There's only one God. Now remember, these king and God are actually synonymous. And that's the one that's introducing the I'm the only one. I'm the only one. Almost to, well, not almost, but at a maniacal, jealous point. I'm the only one. I can only be the only one. And this is why 0 is often omitted from any kind of structure. People don't start with 0. They don't 0, 1, 2, 3. They start with 1 because it shows us the programming. The programming is saying there's one only, this straight line, right? Even though nature never builds in straight lines. Nature only builds in curves. So this is how it worked. So if you look at the two most powerful symbols throughout time, basically, you have the Ankh and the cross. Now, the cross is a direct plagiarization from the Ankh. Because you can sum it up right there. If these so-called controllers did not believe that what was in Kemet was so powerful, why the hell would they drag 1,000-pound obelisks across the world to stick it right in the middle of the Sistine, whatever, the chapel over in Rome? and then drag another one all the way over to Washington, D.C. And it's because the knowledge that was found there in the cradle of civilization, which is shaped like a vagina even. If you look at the Nile River, it's actually almost, not to get explicit here, but the vagina of the world. So through that portal, which anybody in spiritual knowledge, they always hearken back to Egypt, mainly Lower Egypt, though, which is where all the big pyramids are, because that's the underworld. That's where the portal is that leads to the world right below this, where prima materia, or basically matter that has not been shaped, form, and fashion, comes from. So what I'm getting at here is that this system of high levels, the highest level of spiritual knowledge that's ever graced the planet, was taken and directly plagiarized, and that's where all these religions came from. But the key is that the imbalance takes place because in the book, even in the Quran, even the Bible, whatever, God becomes a man only. God is not an androgynon. God doesn't have this feminine component or whatever. God has now become a man. So throughout the book, you find actually, because the book was written by Greeks, and to be quite frank, Greeks were really partial towards men only. Most of the Greek culture was at that point homosexual. The Greeks actually thought that women were a curse. That's why they named all of their diseases like lupus. Lupus is a female wolf. So this trace is so heavy, no one can deny it, but it's by ignorance that most will perish. So what happened is that this Ankh shows you two things. It's got a T on the bottom, that's the cross, but it's got a circle on the top. That's the circle and the straight line. Without those, you can't create anything. Without a pole and a hole, you won't create anything on physical plane. That's even hardwired within every single animal and human being's body, right? There's the male phallus and the female hole. So that's it. But with the cross only shows the masculine side. It only shows the straight lines.
That's true.
And in the book, it's the same thing. You don't run across any really powerful women unless they save the king. And it's only 5 or 6, 7 women in the Bible, and half of them are evil. Yeah. And so what happens is when that kind of ideology goes into a person's matrix, because the matrix is not a word, a matrix only means a womb. People should say false matrix if they're trying to actually determine what's going on in this illusionary reality. So if a person puts this unbalanced ideal in their mind, then their matrix is screwed. So they only see God as this Santa Claus, basically, in the sky. Not them, and definitely not female. So thus they can't create. Now, when we say male and female, just so everyone understands here, understands as we call it, we're not talking about male humans. Because there are male dogs. There are male frogs. We're not talking about female humans only. Because there are female cats. There are female whales. So what we're talking about is what's behind those eyes. And this is what they have to learn to look deeper. What are the forces behind the eyes? Not the quote unquote leading representative. We're only looking, when we say male or masculine, we think of this male with the chest and all this kind of stuff. But we're not thinking that dogs are also males. So, we're going to shave the dog's hair and make him work out too. It's something beyond what we would see just as human. And that's also how we tap into our ancient power, because it goes beyond these bodies. Because the bodies are, they give us this, we see the dog, we see the cat, but we don't see the energy behind all of that. And that energy behind all of that was what the ancestors worked with. That's how they knew that, you can't just take out the feminine component. I don't know what you're trying to do. You're trying to, what they say, oblivious to Baal, the destruction is about to approach if you remove the female component, because you'll have only fire. Mm-hmm. So this is why the God is a fire God. Yah means fire. And then throughout the Bible, there's a lot of burning up. And you can see it everywhere. Everything's just burning with passion. Because there's no water. Even all the warriors, the soldiers, there's no water.
Apart from one big flood, there really isn't much.
Exactly. Well, and then the water, because notice what you just said, because that's the depth. The water is the evil thing. The current reference of the first reference of water in the Bible is the deluge. So no one wants to see water, i.e., no one wants to see the feminine component anymore.
Right.
So this is the deep levels of the programming. And then guess what? Just like G.I. Joe says, knowing is half the battle. Once the person starts figuring this out, it all falls down. It's a deck of cards. 52 cards come out, 52 weeks in a year. There are 4 suits, 4 seasons. And it just goes on and on and on because this is the tarot, which is the cognate of the word rota. Rota means to rotate. It's a wheel. This wheel is a zodiac wheel. So as long as everyone's like a Sagittarius, a Libra, a Taurus, then they're only getting a piece of the pie. Or is it phi?
Right.
If they want the whole thing, then they're going to have to get into wholeness, not peace. Notice that even when the person says peace, they hold up 2 fingers. That's duality. So never will they find any kind of real what peace is supposed to mean in duality. Peace is whole. It should be replaced with the term wholeness, because when we all come together, that's when we're most powerful, no matter what anyone says. It breaks down to something simple. If I got a couch and I can't lift it, if I got my friends with me, we're going to lift this couch. Now, if I think I'm going to lift this thing by myself because I want to be separated from everyone, good luck on the back problems. And that's how it is with Earth. If we think that we're going to fix this ourselves, if we can fix ourselves. See, this is why it's a dual mission. There's a mini game running. You can fix yourself. You don't have to wait on anybody, I don't care who it is, messiahs, whatever, gurus, whatever, to get your total emancipation activation going on. But if you want to take the side mission, that's world enlightenment, that's what I'm engaged in, then you can accept that. So what I'm saying is that there's no linchpin here that, oh, well, if we don't fix the whole world, then we're all going to be destroyed, because, there's those kind of people. But there's always, you can do your own work on yourself first. And then when you find that you're capable, you got the current to be Atlas, because you're going to be lifting a world, then now you can start engaging in that. And that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. That's what many people are doing. And we're doing it in greater degrees. The more we connect with each other, the more we learn from one another, that's what's happening. So what I say is that the universe, it will give you, well, first of all, the universities in this world, they may give you a master's degree. They may give you a doctor's degree. And these are like equivalent of 1 to maybe 3 degrees. In Masonry, actually, a doctor's degree is 3 degrees. The world is 360 degrees. So this means that most of these doctors are missing 357 degrees of knowledge. And that's actually how they behave. They just, they don't even understand anything about the human body, because the human body is a 360 degree system. So the universe is 360 degrees. And it requires that you learn from every single animal, every single element, every single insect. That's why even Solomon says he learned the most from the insects. And this is because nature is the true mirror. It mirrors us. Through nature, we can see the entire design of ourselves. So that's the only real teacher. And this is why the Tibetans called it Neteru. Neters is where we get the word nature from. That's what nature was, netter. And the netters are not human beings with animal heads. They are forces. Wind, fire, all the zoomorphication. See, the reason why they put the animal heads is because each animal has this kind of trait. Like, for instance, the snake, also known as El, hisses and spits. El is electric. He's an eel. Most of the beings that come on earth are coming from the ocean first. That's the real space. So there's a transmutation that takes place when they come on land. So you have to see them before they came on land. So what was a snake before it came on land? An eel. What is eel's power? Electric. So the electric ones, which later on became known as the Elohim, the serpent men, were the ones with this power that had a spark. And they were phallic, because the male generative principle sends a spark into the womb or the amniotic fluid, and that is what generates the first sequence of life. just like in a laboratory, if we put a spark in water, in pure water, a single-celled organism begins to form out of nowhere. Because that's the portal. So this is the same thing of what they're saying with Stargate, that it's a water door, right? This is the metaphor for this is how life comes from water. So then when that finally gets translated into the people who want to control the society, now it's Darwin. Now we've all crawled out of the sludge of the ocean, you see? Versus the information that was produced in the Enlightenment era from George Haeckel about radiolaria, and all of the things that the Royal Society of London and Britain collected from the ocean to show us that all life first originate from the ocean. Plants, trees, the seeds, hearts, kidneys, spleens, any kind of life form, any kind of version of the life form comes from the ocean first. Because as above, so below. The ocean is space. So they may make us think that Earth is just one planet and there's millions of planets out there. But really what it is everything is right here. That's how holograms work. Everything you can obtain right from in the center of self. If you go one more out, you can obtain it all in the planet. If you go one more out, you see, so even going outwards more only makes the job more tougher. You can narrow things down by cornering it within yourself. And so that's what I mean by taking all your power back. I don't make anyone anymore responsible for my demise. I don't say, well, it's because George Bush, and it's because of this, and it's because of the extraterrestrial and the alien of God, because the list will go on and on, because this was a scheme, and I'm being mindful of time here, that was known as the scapegoat. Now, the scapegoat is actually the symbol of this Jesus Christ. It was known as the goat. And this is a ritual that was conducted even within the Old Testament to place the sins of Israel, quote unquote, onto the horns of the goat and then send the goat into the woods so Azazel will devour it and then the people's sins would be atoned. Oh my goodness. But you see how the traditions they keep following. It's the same concept. Now people think, all the crazy stuff they've done and one day will go away if they just go to church. But the true balance must be obtained every day. And so but it's interesting, and I really like the way today's conversation went, because it just covered so many things, but in such a methodical approach to where it may take a person a couple listens, but you'll see this stuff everywhere and around you, because that's what truth really is. Versus, if you have to, wait for it to land, or, wait for it to abduct you, or whatever, you may find yourself waiting forever. And in addition to that, where it's hidden is right in front of your eyes. It's like writing something on your hand, but putting your hand so close to your face that you can't read what's on your hand. That's where this is hidden. It's in us. It's our bodies. It's our creation. It's even the things that go on around us. It speaks to us. 90% of true occultism goes on away from the altar. It's the street you live on. It's your mother's name. It's all these different aspects, your pet, what you gravitate more to, all of that, when run across the blueprint, renders all the information about your life and your whole story and your path, because you cannot exist without it. And so this is why it becomes so amazing, because this is about a person figuring out about themselves. And guess what? Self-centered people tend to have a lot of time for themselves. So the moment that you start saying to them, and this is why I say this is the way to really go with people, is you take them back within and tell them about their power, not about, these rituals and all these different things that have, even if it does give some power, it's only an inkling of what can really be received. It's just scraps from the master's table, if you may. So that's what this is about, is the true tap in. And, and this is about also because I did this. See, I'm not a person that is just speculating. Like I can't get into vain repetition. I've read 10,000 or 15,000 books, and it's only done a fraction of what one true experience really has done for my consciousness. But reading all those books, though, allowed me to be able to deprogram, because now I know what I'm looking at. Some people, they do go into the massive spiritual experience, and the last thing they want to do is read anything else. They're like, I don't deal with all that anymore. But I find if you're in this kind of position to where you're giving information to people who are in the matrix or the illusionary matrix, then you have to be able to deprogram, and you need to give the key. That's why we call it the code to the Matrix. In the movie The Matrix, what did the agents want? The code. What is the code? It's a cipher. Because cipher was the one that was trying to give them the code. And this is because the Wachowski brothers, they understand this stuff because of the cult that they're in. But if nobody checks back, like with all this, Hollywood, Aleister Crowley, all of this, if we don't check back, Santa Claus, Wikipedia, check it all and follow it. Sleipnir, Claus, and all the rest of, Odin and the hunt and the evil elves and the kidnapping children at night and the, all of that, coming down the chimney, that's going down from the person is the temple, they're the house. You come down a person's chimney, you're coming down their spine. What's at the bottom of the chimney? The fireplace. What's at the bottom of the spine? The root chakra, where all the fire is. So what's the whole play? The play is to make Santa Claus become what people think all their energy and gifts and presents are coming from. And this is the deception that goes out to the children every year. So after that consistent programming, now the child is really in service to the king. Because what that all turns into when they're 26, 25 years old is that if anything comes at them in the reality to where they have to choose, either it's going to be the king or them, they're going to naturally choose the king. Because the term ho, ho, ho is a call of a shepherd to the sheep. You see, so
Merry
but it's just
Christmas, huh?
Exactly, Merry Christmas. Come get it. And so but this stuff is like, it's so replete. And now we have this internet. We can, I figured all of that out because I said, you know what? I did one like 3 or 4 years ago. I did a Christmas show and explained, the real origins of Santa. But I said, let's give it another go around. Let's see what happens. I spent 30, 45 minutes. And just because of the depth of the knowledge of where I am now, I can go deeper into to what's being meant. And that's also the beauty of this experience, is that the more that we gain in experience and knowledge, we can look at something that we thought we had already figured out and then go back in even deeper, right? And so and that's that's how this thing is. But that also means that anyone that's on the surface, Mary had a little lamb for a kid, is a little girl with the lamb in her arms. For an adept, it's actually the process of getting ready, the lamb about to be sacrificed. So, it's a whole different thing, but it's the same words. And so that, that's why we're encouraged to, look a little bit deeper. We're deeper people.
Boom. Man, fascinating stuff. And I know for some people, the over-commercialization of this kind of material, the New Age community in general, it can turn some people off. It can make them skeptical, but man, your eloquence, it really drives me to put stock in what you're throwing down because it's just so dense. And, I'm just a humble stoner trying to hang on, but I do love it. And I guess just before we get out of here, we talked so much about balance, and you did mention pH balance and diet and even breath. But to leave the people with something tangible, what other balancing activities would you recommend for people who might be kind of energized at this moment and kind of looking for the next step?
Well, the main thing is actually to come out of judgment. See, everything that I mentioned today, I was generally mindful at telling people, like even with the bad guys, they're just characters in the play. At the end of the day, they're playing their role. They're holding up that particular part of the spectrum. It doesn't mean that we want to go be that or join that, but, we learned from that. That's kind of like a contrast to what you don't want to be in a certain tense. So what I feel like is that one of the biggest things that allowed me to transcend a lot of the brain drain, mental drain, spiritual drain, physical drain, which keeps us from going into the higher states of consciousness, is just the judgments and writing something off. Because if we never see the other side to things, then we actually won't see the other side to ourselves. Because let us all not make a mistake in believing that there's still an essence of even what the Illuminati is doing within everyone, even when a person flies down the street in their car and burns up all that oil and blows out the part of the environment. So we're all playing our part in this. So this means that in many tenses that if we get to the point where we're not judging, we're just actually making sense of all of it and putting it into its proper place, because that's what a supreme being does. When everything is in its place, then it works perfectly. And I put this into a metaphor by letting people understand now, manure, shit, is horrible to eat, but it works great for plants. So it's just about where you're putting it to determine what its true use is and what its true purpose is. And I find everything to be that way, that when things are out of place, then you got unbalance. So that's the first thing, because then if you judge it, you never realize that subconsciously that you're actually judging yourself. All is self. So what it requires is it requires maturity. This is why the adept is adult. These are almost the same word. Because the adult and the adept is capable of using compassion to deal with the children. This means like mediocre concepts and things that still need to be graduated into a higher state. The adept is using compassion because that's also the trait of the divine feminine, which we all have. We're positive and negative beings. We're male and female, even if we feel polarized towards one another. And that compassion is that even if a real woman has a retarded child, she will take care of that child. If the child is disfigured, she will still take care of that child and love that child like it's the same as all other children, because that's compassion. Versus when a person lacks compassion, if there's a flaw, then they're discarding it. They're not even going to try to work, repair it, help it, any of that. Yeah. So this is a part of when we gain back that other side, because remember what we talked about today. Most of the reality is designed in the masculine structure and the fiery, burning, etc. So this means that we're generally lacking the feminine side of ourselves. And that's why the feminine side of the consciousness is the spiritual side, right? And we're not talking about female, woman. We're talking about what's behind the eyes. So what happens is that this balance is serious. We have to really, really look at, in our lives, are we getting too much of one and not enough of the other? And then how to put that into balance is stop focusing on all this external stuff that you can judge, because that's also a reflection to when we can't change anything, we just choose to judge. Oh man, she's just got the wrong clothes on today. Look at that, just raggedy, and just, oh my goodness, I can't believe he's with that dog. That dog is a maniac. And if we start watching our minds, we'll find that the mind spends all of its time judging because it's trapped in Cain and Abel. It's trapped in the two temples. So that's one of the big pointers is find the meaning, solve et coagula, meaning actually find the solution here. Don't just keep highlighting the problem, and never believe for one moment that the solution doesn't exist, because the solution exists before the problem. The root to the word solution is soul. Surely the sun existed before the shadows. The shadows are the problems. It's like the Plato's cave as an analogy. The shadows don't bear witness at all to what's casting them. So we're encouraged, instead of trying to blame the first immediate thing you see, to look beyond, but even that beyond being within, and say, okay, where is this going on in me? Because I'm only seeing a mirror and a reflection. So that's the greatest pointer that I can really give today, is for us to work with our compassion. And as I said, etymologically, it's the compass to Zion. Zion is a projection of the mental, spiritual, and physical mainframe. That's why Sony is so deep into the virtual reality and so deep into technology, because they create Zion. And so for us, because Zion just means a projection, to get through it, because that's what people need. They need that bearing. You have to find yourself more willing to actually assist and switch the polarity, because the polarity for most people is take. They seldom give anything. And that means, though, that they haven't tapped into the most powerful force, which is known to the Commentans as the subjective plane. Subjective plane is only giving. The reason it does this is because it knows a deep secret. When it gives something, the only thing everyone else is going to do is go create something out of that. And so because of that action, it will live through it. So I'll make it simple. The subjective plane is pure energy, unhindered, undetermined, undefined. It has abundance of it. It will never run out. It's limitless. When a person takes from the subjective plane, they can only create something with it. When they create something with it, it actually becomes that. And I can leave everyone with this experience that I had. I was on top of a mountain, and I actually had blown open the third eye. And at this point, I could either go into sheer terror or laugh at what I was seeing, because now I was once again way over my head. And I was beholding the entire landscape and how it was all actually one form, which was too much to take, because it was a large life form. And you got from the frequency and the energy that the whole world was one life form. I mean, you're really getting it. You're just not hearing. I mean, they tell you that, the world's alive and blah, 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 but those are words. Words are not experiences. So when you're actually in there and you see the whole thing, but what was most flooring to me, what took me aback, I was taken aback, was because it was even the things that we call inorganic. Meaning that the cars, the trees, and all the other things were all part of this being. And when I laughed, because that's the only other thing, you sometimes can get stuck like Joker in that position, but when I laughed at the whole thing just to keep from folding under what I was beholding, then it explained. See, that's what I did. I disguised myself as every single thing that my children are using, because they still don't want to come to me. Mm-hmm. And it's because if you really think about it, every single thing that we build, we pull from the earth. Whether it's, I don't care if it's plastic, I don't care if it's glass. The only thing that we do is we pull it from the earth and we, like clay, mold it into something else and we say, oh, TV. But we're never realizing that all of this stuff is actually coming from one massive life form. And that one massive life form is living through all this stuff and watching us and interacting with us through that. And until we're ready to see it as it really is, all one thing, then we're not ready to graduate. But once we do, that's when we become everything. Say all seeing, all knowing. There's no place to take anything from, because where would you put it? Mm-hmm. You see, and that's what we're talking. There's nothing to talk to because no one's listening. It's like that's the totality of our power, and we can prove this from a fact that it exists. It's more firm for us to stand on than concepts that are far-fetching and external, etc. So I encourage people to, if you have the time, check out the Interversity. It's on secretenergy.com. We go through this methodically, because today, we had a smorgasbord. We were like, it's a little bit in there for everyone. But, if a person's looking for, okay, I need that particular topic we need to drill into that. I need to know everything about, what's going on with my body, or, what is my real connection with the cosmos, and, those kind of things is what's really addressed, because everybody kept saying, hey, if you one day could put all this, one particular topic. And so the Interversity consists of 9, I believe it's 7 or 9 different topics that we cover. And so that's what's up. And also, just to let everyone know, I have much compassion for our species. So this is why, this has been nonstop. Like, somebody could listen to the first recording and see that I was still going on like this. It may be about something different. Like, the words are backwards, and that's why it turns your brain into a certain direction, hence the term backwards. But, there's so many jewels and gems, and it was because it was given to me, pressed down and running over, meaning that there's no end to this. Once we tap into it, it's us. Mm-hmm. So that's why I don't actually, it's not hard for me to get in here and do this, because this is about us. And because I'm an optimist, I'm only looking forward to the times that I've already seen, which is when we're all together. So that's what's up.
Oh, man, right on. Yeah, that definitely brings us to the finish line. Yes, I definitely feel a little bit more clarity on some of these things, and I know you could do this for hours, and hopefully I can have you back.
Sure.
In the meantime, man, if people do want to hear more from you, you did mention the Interversity. Remind them of some other places they can.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's hundreds of videos and audios. You can go to astroquest.com, and they're there. And if you type in Google AstroQuest Podomatic, you'll get right to the Podomatic, and they're just all lined up. So you can actually just put it on your cell phone and just, we call it riding out. Most of these recordings are at least 2.5 hours long. Some of them, I think my maxi is like 6 hours. But yeah, that knowledge is there. And then also the site, and there's also elements and different things that a person can choose to utilize to assist them in the process. So first of all, the last thing, it wouldn't be first of all, but I wanted to say thanks, to Higherside Chats for calling me out and getting me here to deliver this message, because it's always an amazing time to connect with new people and to have this opportunity to share.
Yeah, man, you're very welcome. I appreciate that. And yeah, so I guess with that, take care of yourself out there.
For
Very
sure.
powerful. Have a good one.
No doubt. And let me know, if you need anything or you have any questions, I'm always available.
For sure.
All right,
Thanks.
Greg. Okay.
All right, man.